All right, guys, welcome in to episode number 9 of the SEC Basketball Experience here at Southeastern 16. Joined as always by Max Barr. And Max, we got a lot to talk about on this
Oh
particular
yeah.
episode. We're gonna try to guess the next South Carolina, meaning who's the team that's gonna be picked near the bottom potentially. It's gonna just come out of nowhere, be in the title race in the final week of the season. Who's it gonna be? We're gonna try to take our shot at finding out who that could be for 24-25. We're also going to talk to Jay Phillips about the Auburn Tigers heading into this upcoming season. Certainly one of the favorites in the SEC. And we'll also do some trivia, starting lineup for the Florida Gators, and do some likely unlikely. We haven't done that in a while. So
Yeah.
have some fun with some scenarios. Before we do that, as always, let's quickly tell you about our friends at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform, number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive that 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. You can also bet on your college basketball futures if you want to pick an SEC team to win a national championship, perhaps. BetOnline has all the stats, matchups, live odds, and spreads while the games are being played. When it's over, head to the online casino, play some blackjack. Over 150 slots games there as well. All you got to do is head to the website today, get on the action, use that promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online. The game starts here. All right, Max, we're trying to find the next South Carolina. The Gamecocks and Father Lamont Paris last season made us look very silly as we all came in thinking the Gamecocks were going to be the number 14 team. South Carolina fans didn't think that, but they were picked last in the preseason, and they were right there in the title race heading into, as we said, kind of the final week of the regular season. So our task now is to figure out who is going to be South Carolina this season. As always, there may not be a South Carolina this season, Max,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we've got to at least do our best. We haven't released our rankings yet. Those are coming, I promise. You guys would rather us be very thorough with our rankings and just give you,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
half-assed rankings here. We're not going to do that, Southeastern 16. So, Max, where do you begin when you try to find the next South Carolina?
Well, let's start by looking at why were we so wrong on South Carolina? What did we miss?
Well, because
How
we're
were they?
idiots. Well, let's call it what
Well,
it is.
everybody already knows that. Okay, I'm trying to find something else that the people don't already know. Um, when I look at how they had so much success, it was a few things. They had the transfers really hit. BJ Mack was so important for that offense at the five. I mean, we thought we liked BJ Mack out of Wofford, South Carolina kid, but we didn't know he was going to be a vital part of their offense. And then Talon Cooper, we knew he had a good assist rate over at Minnesota. We thought he was going to be, a nice floor general. We didn't know he was going to come in and be one of the best guards in the league. And then Colin Murray Boyles also. I mean, so you had a lot of guys really hit big. And they were old. They were old, nasty, and they played tough defense. So when I'm looking at what team here that is probably going to be consensus bottom half, that I think has some transfers, has a freshman or two that maybe could really hit, I'm going with your client Dennis Gates in the Missouri
Hmm.
Tigers.
I
I
mean,
like that team.
I think that's the easiest answer just because they were at the bottom last year and it was so again, it just kind of just came out of nowhere. Expectations were lower. I think you looked at the roster, but certainly didn't expect that to happen. And I think I'm with you in that Missouri is the easiest choice if you're trying to
Yeah.
find a team because we do expect them to be considerably better than they were last year. The question is, obviously there's nowhere to go but up. So how much better are they going to be? And we've already talked about the roster a lot and all the different pieces that are in place. And it does seem like, that's a team that's going to more so jump up and be a NCAA tournament contender. Now, can they be a team that challenges at the top with some of the other teams that we have talked highly about as well this offseason? That's the real question.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of with you. I had a feeling that would be your answer because I'm thinking, okay, Missouri went over last year. It makes sense. But the thing is, I don't know how low Missouri is going to be picked in the
That's
SEC. And I think that's where it could get interesting because I'm very curious to see because I feel like Missouri is going to be one of those teams that you're going to see a variety of picks on where they're going
Yeah.
to be in the preseason polls. As always, preseason polls mean nothing. But I think they're going to be all over the place in
Yeah.
preseason polls. And we're going to find out who knows ball here because when we see people picking Missouri at 15 or something like that, we're going to have a discussion because I don't
Yeah.
think they're the 15th best team in the SEC heading into the upcoming season. And if they are, then we have bigger issues to talk about heading into the following season, probably.
Well, see, I'm always thinking ahead here, Blake, and I expected you to have a little bit of pushback on my Missouri pick because we've been very high on them. So in my notes for this episode, I have if Missouri is not accepted, this is
Not
my
accepted.
choice.
The judge has ruled Missouri is not your official submission for this exercise.
I saw that coming from a mile away, and so my bolder choice for who will be next year, South Carolina, and I think you'll like this one, is Vandy.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the pieces that they brought in, kind of similar to how South Carolina was. You bring in Hogard, kind of that old, experienced Big Ten guard, Don Cooper. You have a little spark plug, a high volume offensive weapon that not a lot of people are talking about in Jason Edwards. You've got a few guys from Virginia Tech, guy from BC, guy from USC. Got a lot of high major guys that are all. We'll see how they gel together. First year coach is going to be real tough in the SEC this year, but I don't know. They've got some high major talent there, Blake.
I do know because my choice is Vanderbilt. And I mean, we're just continuing a theme here we've had on the SEC basketball experience where, I mean, I feel like Vanderbilt has been part of multiple predictions I've had.
Yeah.
I picked them to make the tournament. There were some other things I remember. I don't remember. Maybe I picked Hogard to make first team All SEC. I
Yep.
can't keep up with this stuff. But I do think they are the selection because I believe Vanderbilt will be picked in the bottom four of the SEC. And if we are trying to
Yep.
stay on the South Carolina theme from last year, I mean, if you want to take the bottom team, you can, but I think it's like, I don't know if I would take the bottom team this year because I think there's a couple options for the potential bottom team in the SEC. But while I do think those teams have a path to be competitive, I think Vanderbilt's a team that has the bigger path to actually move up into that, I'm not going to say like NCAA tournament lock by any means, but I think they have the highest upside based on the full roster. And I think Hogard's the difference, right? And we talked about it at the time
Yes.
when they added him. This roster without him, maybe you're looking at things a little bit more, maybe I'm not as optimistic. But having him running the show, you mentioned they got a lot of guys transferring from power conference level. That's not the same theme with some of these other teams that are bringing in a lot of transfers necessarily. And so, especially the teams that we're trying to narrow down the criteria to fit, right? And
Right.
so, I think Vanderbilt's probably the best choice if we're going by who's going to be the next South Carolina because it has been a team, that has struggled a bit, certainly struggled a bit last year. And I do think they will wind up being picked probably in the bottom four when you look at the preseason polls. I don't see a lot of people picking them above 10. My guess is, maybe on the high side, people are picking them 11th. Low side, I mean, there may be some people that pick them 16th. I wouldn't for all the reasons I mentioned, but I think you're talking about a team that's going to be picked in that range. And if that is what we're using, then I think they are the one over teams like Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, without spoiling our rankings. But I'm just saying, I think these are the
Right.
teams that could be kind of all over the place.
Well, when you look at when you kind of break down Vanderbilt a little bit, I don't want to dive too far in. We can go down a roster rabbit hole here, but Jason Edwards has the skill set and he has that high volume approach to where this can be a guy here playing next to Hogard, similar to. And I'm not making an exact comparison. I'm just kind of trying to play on an idea here, kind of how Tyson Walker was right next to Hogard, and Hogard would kind of be that floor general, more physical guy, and then Tyson Walker a lot more high volume with his offense. I think you can kind of see a similar dynamic where Hogard's going to be bringing the ball up the court. He's going to be running the offense. He's that general. But then when you need to score, boom, he's creating and dishing off to Edwards, and Edwards is this 20-point per game guy. The possibility is there. It's not that far fetched.
I also think depth is interesting with them. I think they're deeper than some of the other teams that you would compare
Yeah,
them to, um, in that same range. And so for that reason, I feel like they are. And look, the simple answer probably would have been there is not going to be a South Carolina this year, like because you don't see that happening every year. Like
yeah,
it's not something that happens every season, especially now that you're adding two more teams to the mix. It becomes a lot tougher to be the team that's picked 15th or something, and all of a sudden you're second heading into
yeah.
March or something. It's like
You're in
that's a
February.
lot tougher. Like that's a lot tougher to accomplish. But South Carolina did it last year, did it in a very competitive league, as we know, and so the Montpelier has proved it can be done. And as I said, I think sometimes even when we release our preseason rankings, I say it every year, they don't matter. Like we're just looking at stuff on
Oh,
paper. There's no way you can predict accurately how a season's going to unfold. You can't predict injuries. You can't predict chemistry issues, all that kind of stuff. Which, like we said, how could we have predicted what would happen with Arkansas last year?
yep.
Based on paper, how could we have predicted that South Carolina would be, in a better place than teams like Kentucky and I mean,
Right.
that's just not what you do with preseason rankings. So I think that's where throw it all out the window. But if we're trying to, judge teams based on where we think they're going to be ranked versus what their actual upside could be, Missouri is the most obvious choice if we accept that you're finding a team that went from the bottom last year to potentially near the top this year if all goes according to plan. But Vanderbilt's a team that's very intriguing for all the reasons we mentioned, not just on this episode, but the other episodes as well.
Yeah, and if I want to throw out a little quick flyer for maybe a dark horse long shot, I don't think the talent's there. I think it's a real long shot, but I just broke down all the SEC 3-point numbers, and Oklahoma shoots a really nice three ball. I'll tell you that much. I think the talent when you kind of get up into that like 8-9 spot in the preseason rankings, kind of get into that middle pack, there's a big talent discrepancy. But hey, I don't know. They know how to shoot the rock there.
Oklahoma was a team I felt pretty clear of what kind of range I was going to rank them in going into our rankings. But when you gave me those 3-point numbers, I started thinking, all right, who do I now put Oklahoma ahead of? Who are all the teams that because I'm in love with these 3-point numbers, all of a sudden are about to take a step back because I got to put the Sooners a little bit higher. So
I
we'll
did the
see.
same thing.
We'll see how it works out when we do our composite rankings.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's an interesting one too. I thought about Oklahoma because I do think they will be picked lower. And I think they're another good choice. So we'll see what we get out of that. But all right, guys, we are going to jump into our interview with Jay Phillips. We're going to talk a lot about the Auburn Tigers heading in, high expectations as usual. So let's chat with Jay. All right, and we do welcome in Jay Phillips, Auburn basketball aficionado. How do you like that, Jay? You think that's
I like it,
that's
man.
a good way to put it?
Yeah. Sounds a little better, a little more professional than super fan.
I mean, you're right. But I mean, you're not just a super fan. You've been in the
Yeah,
business
yeah.
here. You've covered the Auburn beats. You understand what it's like for this program to be where it's at right now. And we've been going through a lot of these teams this summer, and as we've said for some of these, we're like, well, we could see this, we could see that, but there are very few guarantees we feel like in SEC basketball going into the season. But quite frankly, Auburn feels like one of those teams where you feel pretty confident that
hmm
barring, a significant injury, something like that, this is probably a top 3 team in the SEC, and I haven't really, given it much of a second thought. So I guess for you, just like initially, Broom comes back, you got an old roster. Obviously, there's some new additions, but you also, even beyond Broom, you bring back some guys who played key minutes for this team. How do you kind of feel that this roster is sort of filled out, and what are kind of your expectations for it heading into the season?
I really like how they put the roster together. Obviously, getting Janai Broom back was the most important thing for almost any team in the SEC. A couple of arguments to be had in there, but Auburn needed that more than they needed anything else. And it sort of seemed like after that, everything was the icing on top. But yeah, you have some problems at point guard and you go out and you find a veteran and you go out and you find somebody or you already had him really, but Tahad Pettiford, who brings a lot of potential, come off the bench at a couple different positions. So I think they really shored that up. They didn't want to go into the same situation they had last season at point guard. I think that was the most important thing behind Broom. And I think getting JP McGee's and having Tahad Pettiford and Denver Jones around is going to give that position a much higher floor at the very least. And, getting Chad Baker back, I think he really showed some good flashes, both him and Denver Jones at the end of last season. I think they were more givens to come back, but really good there. I think, like you said, they've got a lot of experience, especially in that projected sort of, top 5 players. Whether those guys are going to be the starting 5 or not is hard to say, but a lot of experience, a lot of talent, just sort of a bunch of guys that maybe Auburn didn't get its top pick at every position, but they still seem to be a hand-picked bunch of Bruce Pearl kind of guys. And I really like where they're at. It looks like there's enough talent that they're going to be able to go too deep again at a lot of positions, if not every position. And I think that's kind of hedging some expectations or whatever after how last season ended. But hopefully, you learn some lessons from that. And I think with this talent, this experience, the way, the different sizes and lineups and looks you can throw out there, that this team just has a lot more potential than last year, a lot higher floor than last year.
Jay, kind of diving into the nooks and cranny of the roster, a lot of people have been talking about the 5 spot, one of the best 5 spots in the nation, all the changing pieces with the ball handling roles, but kind of lost in all of the commotion has been the return of Denver Jones and Chad Baker-Mazara. And another kind of idea to that is that this is now year 2. Yeah. And that's a huge thing for transfers, especially transferring up, is that year 2 at that high major. Kind of what are just the general expectations, maybe even your personal expectations for Denver and Chad here in year 2?
Yeah, I think that they can become much more of a centerpiece of the offense when needed. I think you saw that a lot, especially at the end of last season and I don't know if it's just because I'm trying to forget about the Yale game or what, but I just have so many fond memories of how Chad Baker-Mazara played down the stretch last season. He was taking duties as a, facilitator, even though he wasn't playing point guard. He was playing that sort of almost point forward role, not really, more of like the Alan Flanagan role that we've seen Bruce Pearl have in years past, just where, he's getting the ball on a dribble handoff and making something happen. And he was so good at free throws. He was just such a clutch shooter down the stretch that I think I could really see him turning into that wing facilitator for Auburn this season, having a lot more offense run through him, hopefully being a little bigger. He didn't have any problem playing tough, but getting him a little extra size so that he can do that for an entire game for the entire season is going to be a big one for him. And then Denver Jones, I think seeing the way that, he seemed like he was a little bit timid early on last season, but by the end of the season, he was, ready to shoot whenever he needed to and all that kind of stuff. And I think you're going to see him be much more of a typical shooting guard where, catch and shoot and be able to create. And I think with the way that he progressed and with the uncertainty that might still be at the point guard position, I think you could see him being a primary facilitator, playing some point guard minutes as well. And that's not to take a knock on Tahad Pettiford either. I don't know if you guys have seen the Bruce Pearl comments where he thinks that Tahad's going to be playing a lot at the 2 just because he's such a good scorer that, wants to sort of limit his responsibilities and let him just go get a bucket.
Pettiford may come up in another question here in a few minutes. But Max knows that I am contractually obligated to ask this next question because of the feedback we've gotten from our guy Gene on Twitter. We have to talk about Chaney Johnson, okay?
Yeah.
Because he is someone that, again, when you look at the numbers last year, and I think this is what we talked about this summer, they're not just going to jump out off the page at you. Average 15 minutes, 4.7 points, 3.4 rebounds, so forth. But I think it's safe to say that a lot of Auburn fans feel like if you're looking at a guy, we've talked about some of these other guys can certainly take a step forward, but if you're trying to find like your breakout type player, you can certainly say that Chaney Johnson may be the guy, and you can also say that Chaney Johnson needs to be the guy
Mhm.
because of where he's fit into this roster, right? Like we talked about. You've got Broom and Cardwell. We know that. We know both of those guys are slotted in where they are at the 5. But if you're talking about, kind of mixing and matching different guys at the 4 or whatever different lineups Auburn plays, Chaney Johnson's someone that's very intriguing for a lot of reasons. And I'm curious, Jay, what you think about, kind of how his role expands now on this team, knowing that he is one of the older guys, one of many older guys,
Yeah.
and how you just kind of see him fitting in, in terms of his skill set into what they need him to be on this particular roster.
Yeah, I think the 4 position in general is pretty interesting because you've got Chaney, you got all these guys, and you've even got Janai Broom, who Auburn has said might be playing a little bit over there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Jaheim Hudson, Turtle Hudson, who he seems to be a surprise early on in the season or early on in practice and stuff like that. People are really liking his I guess, he did a lot of stuff, very limited roles in the past that Auburn has found a way to sort of allow him to do more of. So I think it's going to definitely be a competition for minutes at the 4. And I think Chaney Johnson, though, the way he played when Jalen Williams went down for a little while and the way that he ended the season as well, he has the skill set that Auburn likes for that position. Super athletic. He can stretch the floor a little bit. He had a couple of decent, glimpses of dribbling the ball and stuff like that. So I do really like Chaney, but I think it might be hard for somebody to shine at that role unless they're just so good that they can demand those minutes, just because I think you've got several guys that can do several different things there. If you want to go with the Twin Towers lineups, you got Janai Broom. If you want to go, more of that bully ball or defensive specialist, you've got Turtle Hudson in there. And I think they've got a lot of different options that they can do with the 4. And just because, I think the 5 best players, at least in my eyes, on this team are going to be JP Pegues, and then you got Denver Jones, Chad Baker, Miles Kelly, and Janai Broom. I don't know if Auburn's going to want to put all 5 of those guys on the court at once, but if you do, I think you're going to have to use a small ball lineup for that as well. So I think, I really like Chaney, but it's going to be a tough year for someone to really show out at the 4 like we've seen, Jalen Williams and Jabari Smith and guys in years past do.
Yeah. So when we're looking at how last year played out, I'm looking at the schedule right now. And a lot of these losses were to teams that could shoot the lights out.
Mm-hmm.
In SEC play, you got Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee. I mean, all those teams did kind of the same type of deal. And then how they ended up losing to Yale. The team just shot the lights out from outside. Bruce Pearl has been on the record saying, I like how we're bigger this year.
Yeah.
We are bigger. To kind of talk to me about how that is going to change here and how maybe this perimeter defense is just going to be a lot bigger and just more equipped to deal with teams that can just chuck it from outside.
Yeah, I think, you add Miles Kelly and, you make Chris Moore more of that just a defensive specialist, somebody who doesn't have to play, but you still have that depth. You have Chad Baker who can hopefully add a few pounds and, contribute more minutes on the perimeter defense. And having Denver Jones as well, he's been a good defender. He was one of Auburn's best perimeter defenders last year. And then you add someone in JP Pegues who might not be, coming in with the type of accolades as Zep Jasper or someone came in with, just being a, all-out dog on defense. But, this guy, he's got good size. He's going to give you more size, experience, more know-how than Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson did last year. So I think that's an improvement as well. And, switching out the freshman guards for Tahad Pettiford, who is just an athletic, freak. And, there's no other way to put it, really. And then you've got Ja'Kai Howard as well, who's coming, they're really liking what they've seen from him based on everything I've heard. Just also an insane athlete who played at OTE last year. And, I don't think that it's going to be a new system or a new look or anything, but I do think you're going to have that added size and experience, and that's just going to help guys lock down, lock in, whatever, when they need to.
Yeah.
All right. So the one thing we talked about last year was feel like everything each week when we do like our power rankings or whatever, the thing we'd always say about Auburn is like they just don't have many weaknesses, if any. When you just
Mhm.
look statistically, there's just no areas where you look at Auburn and we're like, man, they are really struggling there. Um, sure, there were some things that they didn't do as well as others, but there weren't like those just glaring things that stood out. I don't know that there will be this year either. But we've kind of been playing this game, Jay, with other people, and we kind of look at teams heading into the season. We can all find reasons to be just over the moon and optimistic. Um, but let's fast forward to February, and let's say everything goes according to plan for Auburn. What do you think is the biggest strength for this team? So maybe it is the size. Maybe it's just
Mhm.
having an all world player coming back in Broom.
Yeah.
But what do you also think if we fast forward to February, and maybe they're not a top 3 team in the SEC?
Mhm.
What's the one thing that maybe concern maybe too strong a word, but if there's one thing that makes you hesitate, if you're like, I'm curious to see how this plays out, how would you define like the strengths and the potential maybe weakness is too strong a word for this team? Because I just don't see a lot of that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what would you choose for each of those?
Yeah, I get what you're saying there too, and I think if there's something that's gonna, come up and bite this team, it's gonna be point guard play again. I think you've added JP and you've got Tahad Pettiford, you got Denver Jones. I think you have the pieces to make it work. But if maybe one of those guys gets hurt
Mm.
or doesn't pan out, because we haven't seen any of those guys play a full season at SEC level at point guard. So if that doesn't, if one of those guys is out or not playing how they need to for whatever reason, I think you're really going to have to shuffle that backcourt around, and you could get into the scenario where you might not quite have enough guys to play the way you wanted to, which we've sort of seen in years past with Auburn's
Yeah.
backcourts, just having to cycle guys through and guys getting tired by the end of the game and stuff like that. And I think that would be the scariest thing. And, the biggest the biggest strength, of course, is going to be Janai Broom in that front court. You've just got him and Dylan Cardwell, who, I know Auburn fans love Dylan Cardwell, but I think he's going under the radar in terms of being a guy who could start at a number of schools, and it's going to come back to Auburn to just be this likely, utility piece off the bench kind of thing that, I think that they've got just a bunch of different things they can do with that front court that's going to give some teams some real trouble.
I love my Janai Broom over 0.5 3-pointer props. I'm telling you right now.
Oh my goodness!
That
Hold on
I'm
a
going
second.
to be all
Jay,
over that.
we are sitting there at the SEC tournament. Okay, we're sitting there within the media, and I don't even remember which game it was. It had to be the first one Auburn played because I don't think you would have did this for the other ones. But Max has put in a bet on Janai Broom over 0.5 3-pointers made. Right, I believe that was the bet. Okay.
Yep.
And, we're sitting there, and it happens very early in the game. Like, he comes
Mhm.
out and just nails one early. And you would have thought that someone just walked over and handed Max $100 million in pure hard cash because this guy lost it. And it was just one of the funniest things. I wish someone would have captured it on camera because it was a sight to be seen. But he's all in on Janai Broom and these 3-point
Hey, man,
makes.
I am
So,
too, man. If he's feeling it, he can take it. Let's go.
Hey, nobody told me that there was no celebrating on press row.
there are rules, Max.
No, who said
we
you
don't
couldn't
cheer
celebrate for
bets.
yourself, though? I mean,
Right. That is true. That's a good point.
Yeah. Well,
Don't give him any motivation here, Jay.
yeah, this is a slippery slope. But Jay, I'll wrap up here with kind of a personal opinion, if you have one. So you mentioned some stories out of practice early.
Mhm.
Is there anything that, and there may be nothing? Is there anything that you've heard that is just kind of piques your interest? Like, ooh, that's a little development there out of practice, or there might be nothing at all?
I mean, I think the most interesting thing has been the hype and the praise that Jaheim Hudson has gotten. I think when he was added, I remember I sent out a tweet about it, and I was like, this might not have been the big name for that Jalen Williams replacement that everybody was hoping for, but he looks solid, and Auburn's got a lot of front court pieces. And like people were in my mentions like, oh, this is the downfall kind of thing, and all that. everything that the Alabama Twitter accounts were saying, the Auburn fans were mirroring and stuff like
Yep.
that. It was just like, I don't know, like people were up in arms about it, but he's come out in practice and seemingly been a very solid piece. And, they've said that he can stretch the court. And that was something they were hoping, they saw a few little glimpses of it in his past. And we're hoping if he was put into a role that let him play like that he was going to be able to. And that sounds like what he's doing. I don't know if he's going to be, coming out and playing over Chaney Johnson or anything, but kind of hoping for a Horace Spencer-ish role where, he can come in and do what he needs to do. And he's a big body, really good rebounder, strong defender who can, shoot the three, make an open shot when he needs to. And, I don't really know if that's as flashy as it might be, but, and Ja'Kai Howard as well. I think he's, funny story. I watched Ja'Kai Howard play as a freshman in high school, and I was there for a couple other different players when he was at Norcross, and they was in a playoff game, and he comes out and hits a step back three, and he's a freshman, and then he comes in a fast break and in game has a windmill dunk and dunked it over like three different players at one point and ended up getting hurt in the process and missing the rest of the game. But it was just one of those immediately like, okay, this guy's got it. Like I remember texting everybody like, man, this some random kid just, and now he's on Auburn. But, he sounds like he's had that same effect when everyone watches him. It's just like, this kid's so athletic that he can really make some things happen that, nobody else can just because of that. Coming in as a 6'6" freshman who can jump out of the gym gives you some stuff that might not be seen very often, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. We're wrapping up with this one. Jay, I'm giving you the hard hitter to finish this thing up. There's no way you can accurately know this question, but you can either answer yes, wait and see, or no.
All right, let's see.
Is this Auburn's best chance to make a Final Four since 2019? Now, of course, in between there, you had a team that went 25-6. You had the team that went 28-6 as a 2 seed. You had last year's team goes 27-8 as a 4 seed. Is this going to be the best chance, or how do you want to like move forward with that, or are you in kind of wait and see mode?
I guess I'm a bit wait and see mode, but I think if the point guard play pans out even to a decent level, if it hits its floor that I see, then I think it is, just because you've got the top end college basketball talent, you've got the 5-star talent, you've got a bunch of senior veteran players transferring in and coming back, and it's hard to, you can't really have a better recipe than that. And I think that the Jabari Walker team obviously has a great claim, but in hindsight, that backcourt was just too weak. It was all Wendell Green so often that there was just nothing happening. And then last year's team as well, you're depending on a backcourt with 2 freshmen or, a freshman and a sophomore. And I think you've got basically the same team as that one, except you've kind of answered the questions per se. So I think so, but wait and see.
It's always a smart answer, I think, with these kind of questions. So
They got
there
the
you go.
recipe, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both agree. And when we release our preseason rankings here soon, I think everyone will understand why we're very high on Auburn. But Jay, great to catch up with you, man.
Yeah, of course.
Let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me. I think my name's down there, AUBAWN. I'll be getting more and more active as we get back towards basketball season.
Yep. Check it all out there. Jay Phillips, again, Auburn basketball aficionado. That is what we're using as your tagline here.
I like it.
But Jay, we appreciate the conversation, and we'll talk to you again here soon.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
Great conversation with Jay Phillips, as, again, very high expectations for the Auburn Tigers heading into 24-25. But, Max, very high expectations for you as well as we head into trivia. Because
that was good.
I don't really know what your record is, but we all know I've been on a roll recently in the SEC basketball trivia. So my guess is you have really done some extensive research here to try to break the streak for me, to see if you can knock me off this pedestal here. So therefore, I'm going to go first because we want to build up to the big moment. So I'm going to ask you this. Free throws, as we know, per someone very famous on Twitter, are free. They don't cost anything. They are free. Just ask Tony Patel's. So my question to you is this: Who, and this is a recent player who's played in the SEC in the past 5 years, who holds the all-time SEC record for free throw percentage in a single game, minimum 15 attempts? So I will tell you right now, there are quite a few players that have shot this percentage, and you know what the percentage is, right? It's making every free throw. But this is the guy who has made more in a single game to get to that 100% mark than anyone else in SEC basketball history. Name
Wow.
that player.
Wow. I usually say the first name that comes to my mind, and that's usually wrong. But is it JD Note?
That's an interesting guess because he is not someone who's even on this list, but that actually would have been one I would have thought of. Because that's not a bad one at all because he was someone that I think had some opportunities, but it's not JD Note.
Okay.
I'll give you one more guess, just quickly, just for the fun of it. You're gonna bang your head against the wall when you realize who it is, but
no, I'm not.
you are, because I don't want to say it's obvious, but like this would have been one of my top 3 guesses.
Wade Taylor.
That's another interesting guess, but no. This guy went 23 for 23 from the free throw line. And remember, he went 23 of 23. The second person, Matt Freege for Vanderbilt, went 18 of 18 in 2003. So there's a 5 free throw difference here from the guy who went 23 for 23. There is a certain fan base screaming through their screen right now to let you know that the player who went 23 for 23 in 2019 was none other than Grant Williams against Vanderbilt, hit all 23 of his free throw attempts. Mr. Grant Williams, who was on your SEC All-Decade team, you stole him from me, and you can't even get the trivia question right as it pertains to one of his greatest accomplishments.
That's insanity. 5 free throws more than the second place guy?
Yeah. I mean, that game, he was just rolling. I'm actually going to look it up real quick. I know I can find that. I'm pretty sure it was an overtime game. That was an overtime game played at Memorial Gym in Nashville. Grant Williams, an all-timer performance because the 23 for 23 came. I was like, I couldn't remember. I thought it was 41. He had 43 points that game. So he scored 43 of Tennessee's 88 in an overtime win. Jordan Bone had 14. Everybody else was kind of, in single digits. But yeah, Grant Williams just completely... Vanderbilt fans were also probably screaming through the screen because they remember that game very well for Grant Williams getting 23 free throws, but he hit every single one of them. So
my mind was solely on point guards. I wasn't even thinking big men.
I get it. Man. Yeah, he took over that one. So there you go. Impressive. All right, here we go.
Alrighty,
let's keep it going here.
KenPom numbers go all the way back to 1997. Okay, 1997 until now. What SEC team has the best defense ever? Now, I listed the top 4, and I will, if you get any of the top 4, I will accept that as an answer. But this is the KenPom defensive efficiency. So not their ranking, like not if they came in first, like the actual defensive efficiency.
So the actual number.
Yep. You don't have to guess the number, but this is like, because there's been a few different SEC teams that have finished the same nationally, like their rank. This is like the actual defensive efficiency. Who has the best defense ever in the SEC? Well, to 1997.
Okay, so all you need me to do is you need me to name the team and the year, or just the team?
The team and the year.
Oh God! Oh dear God! Oh boy! Well, yeah, I knew you.
If you don't get the year, that's fine.
Well, I mean, Tennessee's got to be one of them.
Yep.
I mean, there's no question. Like when you think about
what year?
The team.
What year?
Well, I mean, it's got to be. What was the year they had? Oh goodness. Wasn't last year, right?
It was
No.
not 2023.
No. I mean, it had to be one of the Rick Barnes era teams. I mean, like,
Yep.
I'm trying to think back to, like, Bruce's teams at
No,
Tennessee.
no,
But
no.
no, I was going to say they were not defensively anywhere. Was it the team the year before last?
Yep.
23, 22, 23? Because that would
It
have
was
been
20. Yeah.
you would have
That
had
was Plavsic, John Fulkerson,
yeah.
Huntley Hatfield, Adu's freshman year, Kennedy Chandler.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that year.
That's nuts. Okay.
They are ranked. They are tied for third. So they're tied for third with another team that you'll never get, because it's back in 2000. But then there's a first and second above them.
Interesting.
Do you want to give a go at those first or second, or you want me to just tell you?
Non-SEC teams?
No, these are SEC teams.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Man, I mean, I would have picked Tennessee teams probably throughout. Well, actually, no. I take that back. Kentucky. Kentucky would have had, either the Anthony Davis teams, maybe, the Karl Anthony Towns. I want to say Florida had.
Kentucky's number one.
Florida's got to have a team in there too. If we're going all the way back to there, it's got to be Florida, because was it one of the national championship teams or was it another Florida team?
It was another Florida team. Kentucky's one.
I bet it was the Florida team that went. Oh man, was it 2014, 13?
13.
Somewhere in. That's it. That's the one I was trying to think of. Okay, all right.
Yep, that was the the starting lineup for that team was Scotty Wilbekin, Kenny Boynton, Casey
Patrick Young, Prather, yep,
and
William Getty was on. Murphy was on there. Okay, yep.
So that was that. That was number two. Okay, so the actual defensive efficiencies, it goes Tennessee's at 3 with 86.4. Florida 2013 team is 86.0, and then Kentucky 2015 is 84.4.
Best. Oh, that's right. The Kentucky, the undefeated.
That was the undefeated team with all the height. And then tied for third with Tennessee is all the way back in 2000. LSU's team. I don't even have a roster.
Was that Glenn Davis? Maybe. I don't remember, but that was.
Don't remember, but
I'm gonna find it.
That was the year I was born, so I was not watching. I was not watching SEC hoops.
Trivia notes for everyone. Okay, yeah, okay. So that was Stromile Swift. I mean, now it makes sense. Stromile Swift, automatic defensive, just block party. They had Ronald Dupree, they had Taurus Bright. Collins Temple was there. Yeah, okay. That makes sense with Swift, because Swift was just blocking shots like nobody's business.
There you have it. Yeah, so LSU, Tennessee, Florida, and then Kentucky 2015 is the best.
Interesting. All right. Well, I would say I get another victory.
Yeah.
The streak continues,
nice.
But let's go to our streak of picking starting lineups, and we get to the Florida Gators now this time around. And as always, Max, we'll do this guarantees first, we think. And I think there are a couple guarantees, or I think there's 3 guarantees. And that is all kind of when it comes to the perimeter play. Walter Clayton Jr. is going to start. Elijah Martin, the FAU transfer, is going to start. And Will Richards going to start. I think that's pretty clear cut. But then things get interesting, because that front court for the Florida Gators, you got some options there. And based on our conversation with our guy Neil Blackman, he gave us some things to think about when it comes to this starting group.
Yeah, so just real quick before we move on from the backcourt, that international Urban Clavzar, big expectations for him. Big expectations, and we're high on the Aberdeen breakout too. So, but they're not going to start. I just wanted to mention Clavzar because he's
Tommy Hawk. We got Tommy Hawk on this roster too.
Come on,
now he's going to fit into the front court, but listen, we got a lot of breakout candidates for the Gators.
Breakout candidates here. So when we look at the front court, I'm looking at the 3 guys. Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu, and Sam Alexis. I don't know who's starting at the 4. I don't know who's starting at the 5, but it's going to be 2 of those 3 guys. And do you have a I have a favorite out of those 3. Do you have a favorite out of those 3?
Who's your favorite?
Condon.
I think Condon would probably be, just based on. Yeah, because I think it's having him. We saw what he could do last year, and we kind of know that, like, another breakout guy, right? It's like, I mean, I think Condon would be my choice, but.
Well, when you look at Condon, I mean, this was a guy playing like 17, 18 minutes a game in SEC play as a freshman. I don't see that going backwards at all.
Either. Yeah.
So I'd say Condon. And then it comes down to the Sam Alexis versus Ruben Chinyelu argument. And depending on which Florida guy you talk to, they have different opinions. Some guys like the numbers that Chinyelu has, like the efficiency numbers that he has in short minutes. And then others like the kind of reliable veteran presence of Sam Alexis. I don't know.
I was like, we anytime we do these, we always probably are going to lean on, like, okay, the veteran part is what, like, okay, but you think about it, it's all these transfers, like, so many transfers come in, we're like, well, all these guys have played, but yeah, this would be so much easier if Han Logden was playing.
Oh,
right?
so much easier.
Like, this would just be a simple, let's breeze right on through. But I mean, it's very intriguing size-wise to have the 2 6'11" guys side by side, right? So, I don't know, though. This is a tough call. Like, this is one of our tougher position calls, I think, for me at least.
Yeah, I'm going to say, for the sake of picking a 5 for this segment, I'm going to say Chinyelu because of what Golden did last year with playing the 2, with Han Logden and Samuel being on the floor at the same time. I can see him kind of following that same blueprint and going with the 6'11" Condon and 6'11" Chinyelu with all that height. I'll go with that.
I like that too. I think that's probably. I just feel like they're the kind that, yes, they would like to play the two big guys. Like, I think that's because the guard positions, like, I mean, again, like, they're all taken care of. Like, there's no question whatsoever. But I do think, I don't know if deceptive is the right word, but I think the depth for the Florida front court, even without Han Logden, is very underrated. Like, I think they got a lot of pieces they can plug in there. So, yeah, I think that's I like that. I like Clayton, Martin, Richard, Condon, Chinyelu. I think that's the what I would go with. Yeah,
lock it in.
Lock it in. Sure to be here, Southeastern 16, the SEC basketball experience. All right, likely or unlikely, we're bringing it back by popular demand. As always, if you missed it the first couple times around, we just pick a couple scenarios for the upcoming season, and we give our thoughts. Do we think it's likely to happen or unlikely to happen? Max, you go first.
Okay, good. I'm excited about these. I got 2 good ones for you. Okay, here is scenario A. Texas A&M shoots north of 30% from 3 as a team. Now, let me give you the numbers their past 5 years, okay? This is going in order. 29.3%, 32.6, 32.4, 29.9, and 29.4. So out of the past 5 years, they're only 2 for 5 for shooting north of 30% as a team, which
All right. So to answer this question, I need to look up something very important because I don't remember off the top of my head. We're going to look up the 3-point percentage from last year's team, and we're going to see who's back and who's not back. So really, when you look at it, percentage-wise, now, again, some of these guys aren't shooting a lot of numbers. The thing is, Wade Taylor shot 302 last year. He made 98 of them. So he shot 32.5%. So it's kind of at that that range, right? You lose a couple guys off of there, but the fact is you actually lose, well, Jace Carter, he was not percentage-wise. He took the second most on the team at 142, but he only shot 24.6%. So that was not ideal either. But you get like all the other guys back in terms of like Radford's not back, but he shot 28%. So that, Hayden Hefner only shot 28.6%. My
He had a
goodness.
bad shooting year.
I did not realize like this was kind of okay. Well, I will say that they will shoot above 30%, but not by much. So I will say likely.
Okay. Well, you're pretty much right on. So I took every player that's on the roster and added up their last year's 3 numbers. So you got Wade Taylor, CJ Wilcher from Nebraska, Jace Carter, Hayden Hefner, Zurich Phelps from SMU, Obaseki, Washington, Garcia, Henry Coleman, and Farrell Payne. I took all their numbers from last year. 30.6%. So you're going to be right on it.
Interesting.
Yep.
All right. I'll bounce back to me for this next one. Here's one I think that may make you think a little bit here. So, likely or unlikely? Jackson Robinson leads Kentucky in scoring. Now that's tough because of all the other like possible scenarios because you've got a brand new team. So something to think about.
Okay. Now Jackson Robinson led BYU in scoring.
He did.
He also took 229 threes, which was more than Kobe Brea's 201. I'm going to say likely. I think he's going to be their highest volume guy. And compared to the other high volume guys, the only guys that shot over 200 threes last year were Robinson, Almanor, and Brea. I think Robinson is going to be on the floor for the longest period of time. I'm going to go likely.
I think this is an easy likely for me. I was just curious if you were going to bite on, okay, maybe someone else winds up being like the breakthrough top scorer guy, again, maybe it's Bray or maybe it's somebody else like that. But I think if you have to do this based on probability.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely.
I'll go likely.
It's definitely Robinson, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. On to my second one. I'm sticking with the 3-pointer theme. I've been hyper fixated on 3-pointers for like a week. I don't know why. Got to get out of that. Get back to my bully ball. But anyways, Alabama shoots more threes as a team than Kentucky. Now, I asked this because last year when KenPom has a stat 3-point rate, it's just your 3-point attempts divided by your total field goal attempts. That's all it is. BYU was at 50.4%. They were 4th nationally. They were the first high major. Alabama just underneath at 46.5%. They were 19th nationally, 4th high major. So these were two of the top 4 like most frequent 3-point shooting high major teams in the nation last year.
All right, so which way did you phrase it again? You went
Alabama shoots more.
Okay. Likely.
Give me the.
I just think the makeup of the team is
okay.
Yeah, I think I would say likely. I just think based on the makeup of this year's team, even though you talked about the numbers, like I think it's more likely Alabama's shooting more.
I like it. I don't have a you've said,
I mean, look, the only reason I said that it sounded definitive. It's not because we brought up the numbers like for Robinson and Brea and those guys, right? So it's not definitive, but I still think given Alabama's history, I will lean on that more so. I don't know though. It's not as definitive as I made it sound. I will say that, but I still think it's going to be Alabama.
So when adding up all of the rosters numbers from last year, Alabama took 1,080 and Kentucky took 1,048.
So it's
So
very close. Yeah.
very close.
So if you take the if you subtract the guys who are not on the Alabama roster this year that were on there last year, and then you add all the combinations for Kentucky, I think it'll be close. But
It'll be very close.
I still think just getting Mark Sears back gives me more confidence that he's gonna have some of those games where he's just, Nelson's back.
Yep.
All the guys we talked about. So I'll go.
But what I will add before we move on from this is how cool is it that we're having a discussion of who's going to shoot more threes in the SEC?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I like it. Yep.
I agree. All right. I was gonna go with one that's kind of just tongue in cheek, but I'll give you a serious one, I guess. This is a funny one, but I may go with it anyways. But it just gives you a chance to talk about your guy,
Okay.
Max. How likely is it that? How likely is it that Colin Murray Boyles finishes in the top 5 in the SEC in scoring?
Oh, it's a fantastic question.
I was going to go another question, but I tried to get a little more serious with this one.
I like that a lot. Boy, that's a great question. I'm not even going to look at numbers. I was going to pull up numbers from last year. I'm not even going to pull them up. I'm saying likely because when you look at how South Carolina's team was built last year and how productive Colin Murray Boyles was, you had a lot of offense ran through BJ Mack. At the top of the key, dump it to him down low. There was a lot of offense ran through him. I'm not taking anything away from Nick Pringle, but he does not have the same offensive game as BJ Mack whatsoever. And I feel like if you're going to, in a league like the SEC, if you're going to have low post scoring, you're going to rely on Colin Murray Boyles a lot more. I've also heard reports he's been expanding his outside shot. You don't have a super high volume guy like Nishi Johnson anymore. I just think they're going to need. I mean, if Colin Murray Boyles isn't scoring in bunches, who is for this team? Because you have a defensive maestro in Zachary Davis at the 3, who's not going to be scoring in bunches. You've got a freshman or Jacoby Wright at the 2. Who knows? Could blow up. And then you've got another transfer, Jamari Thomas, who knows, also could blow up. But, I mean, process of elimination, Colin Murray Boyles is going to have to score a ton.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. And for all the reasons you mentioned, I think his usage goes up. And
it has
when you take away, it's going to be close because, again, there's going to be a lot of other guys on other teams but that are going to put up points. But I think I would also think there's a pretty good chance for likely based on the development, the jump, and just the overall usage for that team. So I'm with you. I think that I would probability-wise give a more bet to that. So there you go. All right. Are you ready for predictions, Max?
Let's do it.
One bold prediction.
Do it.
Some of these are bolder than others. I'm going to start with mine, Max, because in case you may have seen, Joe Lenardi put out his July bracketology. And, as always, it's July bracketology. It doesn't really mean a whole lot, but it's kind of fun to look at. A team that has continually been snubbed, I think, in Joe Lenardi's bracketology in terms of seeding has been the Florida Gators, who this time around are a 9 seed and falling.
What? Falling?
Or have fell to a 9 seed, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
He's got the arrow pointing down. So I'm here to tell you that I don't know how bold this is for Florida fans, but I'll just give you my thoughts. My bold prediction, the Florida Gators are going to finish as a top 5 seed heading into the NCAA tournament next March.
Ooh. Hey, that's bold. Lenardi's got him as a 9 and you're going top 5.
Mm-hmm.
What about this Florida team do you like so much?
I like the fact they got Walter Clayton. I like the fact they got Elijah Martin. I like the fact that they've they got one of the best backcourts in the SEC.
Yeah.
They got a top 3 SEC player in Walter Clayton. We've already established that. He comes back another year. He's going to be one of the top 5 scorers in the league.
Yep.
Martin, I've said, I think is an all SEC player. Neil mentioned all the reasons why he could be an SEC Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And then we just said it. They've got a plethora of options in the front court to where they can play multiple combinations of lineups and all this other stuff. I think there are guys that are not being talked about a lot that maybe aren't even being factored in for people that can break out. So getting much higher on this Florida team than maybe I was 2 months ago.
Urban Klabzar is averaging like 23 some points a game overseas. Like, he is very legit. I feel like people, just because you don't see Logton or Samuel in the front court, you just take too much, you put too much weight into that. I like it though. Florida top 5. Wow. Okay. So we've been talking a lot about points per game here in the latter half of this episode. My bold prediction for episode 9 is that, now this bold, because I'm not saying top 5 or top 3. I'm saying the leading scorer. He will lead the SEC in points per game. Josh Hubbard. I'm saying Josh Hubbard leads the SEC in scoring. It's similar to why I said likely for Colin Murray-Boyles to be top 5. They don't have a choice. They lost. I feel like this has just kind of been just swept under the rug. Tolu Smith is not there anymore. This is a multiple year, one of the best big men in the league. And Cameron Matthews, I love him. Probably my favorite player in the SEC. He's not a back to the basket guy. He's a slasher. He's a cutter. He's a transition dunker. Riley Kugel, Melendez, Sean Jones at the 3. None of them too consistent, reliable. And then you have Kanye Clary next to Hubbard now, who is going to be much better at distributing and breaking down his defender off the bounce than the defensive specialists of Davis and Moore. So I think you're going to have better creation around him, and you're going to have way less reliability of low post scoring. I think Josh Hubbard we could see, what did we have? 2 people averaging 20 plus? Was it Connect and Sears last year? Only 2? I don't think anyone else got up to 20.
I think that's right.
I think it was only 2. I think you have Hubbard 20, north of 20 this year.
So my likely or unlikely was going to kind of be tongue-in-cheek, but it could have been a serious question. I was going to ask you if Josh Hubbard was going to lead the SEC in field goal attempts this year.
Oh, my God. Well, yeah.
No, it's unlikely, and you know why? Wade Taylor.
There should be an asterisk next to that question. Wade Taylor does not count.
Because, let me look it up real
What'd
quick.
you say?
Maybe I'm just off, but I'm
302?
curious. What did they shoot last year? Well, never mind. We'll find it on the next episode.
Josh Hubbard shot 478 field goal attempts last year.
Taylor shot 585. So that's why I was going to say. I was hoping you would just say yes based on emotion and instinct, but it's not even close. Wait, Taylor shot 585 last year. So, yeah. Josh Hubbard's going to have to step it up a bit. So, there you go.
There you have it.
All right. This was the SEC basketball experience. Hope you guys enjoyed it. All our silliness and sometimes serious banter. But as always, check it out. Everything else we got here at Southeastern 16. You can find it. Football, baseball, it's all there. Check out all of our other basketball stuff. We are doing videos outside of this podcast, so you can check those all out on YouTube, Southeastern 16. If you want to sponsor the show, as always, reach out, caroline.smith at southeastern14.com. We know it still says 14, but don't worry, it's getting to the 16 address. No fear, folks. Just send it to that address if you want to sponsor the show, advertise, anything like that. But as always, we appreciate you guys watching and or listening, and we'll talk to you again here soon. Southeastern 16.